Okay, everyone, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm sure there are going to be people jumping on as we go for the next probably 5 minutes or so. But I am Julie McCarty. I'm the CEO of True Texas Project. With me, I have Fran Rhodes. She's our president. She has done a fantastic job of getting some people on here tonight to help train us on elections and being a candidate. So we're going to jump right into that pretty quickly. But I do want you to know that you are all muted, at least you should be. If you have questions during this presentation, we want you to put it in the chat group. And then at the very end, after everybody's done presenting, Fran and I will read your questions. We'll choose which questions, read them. You might want to say this question is for Luke or this question is for Nate. And then we can address those people directly and get your questions answered as best as we can. I think there's really no announcements to say. Like I said, there will be people jumping on. I know we have candidates in the audience. We have consultants and managers. We have people that just want to jump in and help campaign. And I'm sure we have a few enemies too that are trying to steal our trade secrets. So welcome everybody. All we want to do is save Texas. There's my goofball husband. He does it every single link, every single Zoom. So, okay, Fran, why don't you introduce our first speaker?
Sure. Our first topic tonight is what it takes to run for office. And for that, we have the very experienced Luke Macias. Luke is founder and president of Macias Strategies, a political and policy consulting group. He is also the host of the popular Luke Macias Show on YouTube. He brings extensive campaign experience to the discussion, and he will be talking to us tonight about what it takes to run for office. Take it away, Luke. Someone has to unmute Luke.
There we go. I'm unmuted. I wanted to first make sure everybody knew that I am wearing shorts and that I would not be wearing shorts if we were not on Zoom. But I am. And my wife said, "Why aren't you wearing pants?" And I told her, "I'm wearing shorts." She goes, "Are you going to tell everybody?" So I told everybody. There you go. We're done. I'm being honest. Here's the deal, guys. I'm going to go through a couple different things. I've run about 167 campaigns, and that's anything from small. I'm kind of like taking precinct chair races out of that. Okay. But let's just talk about city council, school board, county commissioner, state representative, senator, congressional, statewide, anything like that. And so want to kind of bring a little bit of that perspective to y'all. Now I help run the Defend Texas Liberty PAC and do other things that are helping to work to elect as many candidates as possible. We were really proud to support Tim O'Hare and Nate Schatzline, two candidates that are here that did a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about today. So other people are going to really break things down in a very detailed fashion. I'm going to start with some very big picture perspectives on what it takes to run for office. And I want y'all to be thinking about this as a candidate, as somebody who's trying to recruit candidates or work for candidates, or as somebody who's just helping somebody else get elected, right? The way I think of activists is each and every one of you are trying to decide, is this an army I want to join? Is this a battle I want to go to, right? So in some of that, to sum that up, you go like, well, what does it take to win this battle? And then I know if I want to participate. So let's go through a couple of these things real quick. I've got about 15, 16 minutes of stuff, and then we'll be able to get to the next person. So just to give you all kind of an expectation for what that will be. So a couple quick bullet points. This is going to take a minimum amount of money and a minimum amount of time. And Kathy is going to get into some specifics on how you raise that. And Murph might talk about how you budget it and other specific things with your campaign finance, how you report that stuff. But it's a minimum amount of money and a minimum amount of time. And so what that will look like is, I tell most candidates, especially if you're running for a state representative position like Nate is going to run for, or a county commissioner position or a countywide position for a medium-sized county, you probably need to commit to a minimum of 5,000 doors that you're going to knock as a candidate. Okay. Or if you're an activist, you're asking a candidate, are you willing to do that? And the easiest way to sum that up is that is about 50 full-time days. So when it comes to time, you're going to have the time it takes to go to evening events, the time it takes to meet certain people for coffee, the time it takes to call your friends and family and people you know and ask them for money. And then the time it takes to physically get out and walk for voters. So when you talk to people who are running for office, I had a candidate one time when we sat down and talked about running for the legislature, he said, "How much money do I need to spend to not have to spend time on the campaign trail?" And he was a very wealthy guy. And he was literally like, "I'll write a large check if it means I don't have to go talk to voters." And I said, honestly, I'd rather you pay yourself hundreds of thousands of dollars to not work for the next several months and decide to run for office. So minimum amount of money, minimum amount of time. So that's the time part. The money part to calculate, well, how much? So time, 50 full days of walking. Maybe it's a small race. Maybe it's something really tiny that's different, but you got to go to those events, meet with people, do all that. Minimum amount of money is going to take, well, depending on the race, you can get an idea. For state legislative races, I usually tell people at least $100,000. If you don't see some sort of reasonable possible path to that amount of money, then it's going to be a very hard mountain to climb. There are very rare exceptions of people who have gotten elected for less than that. Tony Tinderholt is one in Arlington. He got elected for $74,000. Molly White in Belton for $48,000. You can try to be the exception of the rule, but you just need to know that whole time that you would be the exception to the rule if you were to win. And so minimum amount of money, some of that's your own, some of that's people. And Kathy will talk more in a more detailed fashion about how to kind of figure out what you think that number is going to be, and then how to potentially go for it. Okay. So minimum amount of time, minimum amount of money, people other than yourself. And I think this applies to activists and candidates. And so if you're a candidate and you're going to run for office, you have to recognize that even just outside the very small group of people that you know, it's going to take a lot of other people. If you're uncomfortable asking people to help you actually try to win, okay, then that is going to be something you have to get over and question whether or not you should get in, okay? If you're an activist and you want to run, if you want to help somebody, okay, it is very unlikely that on election night, you are going to be able to quantify just the amount of work you did and say that delivered the race, right? So my dad ran for office in 2006. I was 16 years old, and we defeated a Republican incumbent, Rhino, by 45 votes of 20,000 cast. And so in that situation, it was pretty easy for one or two people to literally say, like, my effort in this campaign, the amount of people I converted at the doors probably won the election. And my dad lost re-election in 2008 by 17 votes of 30,000 cast. And so again, those are the rare exceptions to the rule. But more often than not, the margin is wide enough where the way to get there happened with a whole lot of people doing a whole lot of things. That's why Tim's going to talk about organizing all these volunteers and getting people together. So whether I'm a candidate, somebody helping and working for a campaign, or an activist, I'm just recognizing going into this, it's going to take a whole lot of people other than me. So I'm going to take ownership of what I can do. I'm going to own my precinct. I'm going to send letters. I'm going to block walk. I'm going to donate a certain amount of money. Or if I'm a candidate, you might say, I've got this much money to put into my race. I've got this much time I can do. That's all great, but there are going to need to be other people outside of you that are going to come in. So that means what it takes to win is having somebody who's willing to actually ask a bunch of people to help. It's uncomfortable. When I was 16, I would text all my friends in high school and I would be like, hey, what do you do? The first thing I would text them, I would say, I have a question for you. They'd be like, what? And I'd say, do you love Jesus? And then if they said yes, I would say, cool, then I'm assuming I will see you Saturday at 10 a.m. We're going to block walk and you can do it. And then you're going to do a minimum, right? Now that may be gaslighting them. And I wasn't super familiar with the term at the time, so I don't know that I wasn't doing that intentionally, but ultimately you're going to need to ask a bunch of people and drag them in. Some of those people ended up loving the political process and are still involved in politics today. And some of them did one weekend for me and said, I hate this and I never want to do it again. And I said, cool, that's fine. But you have to pull people in, whether you're an activist, whether you're a candidate, whether you're somebody who's working for other people. Consistent messaging is really important. And this is something that, again, activists, candidate, everybody involved, you need to sit down and decide what it is that are the few things you want people to know about you and what are the few things you want people to know about your opponent. And honestly, depending on who you're running against, the list can sometimes be pretty long, right? And in some ways that makes it more challenging. It's sometimes easy if you can have 1, 2, or 3 things that are really, really bad. A lot of candidates who are running right now against bad Republican incumbents are people that I'm talking to and have talked to, and I've sent them different votes that legislators took. Hey, there's this vote. Here's this vote. Here's this vote. And when you start combing through the list, you realize, golly, there's just a whole lot of stuff. Well, you've really got to narrow it down. Tim O'Hare's here, and he's going to talk about organizing people, but there were a handful of things he really wanted people to know about what he did. And there were a handful of things that his political opponent had done that were most offensive and grievous. And if you just throw everything at the wall, voters have way too much information coming in. So now is the time. From now till the end of the year, you're basically working out a lot of these messaging. Sometimes with candidates, I'll tell them, or with activists, I'll say, hey, there are 5 things that this rhino Republican has done that you can't stand. Well, go knock your precinct and tell the voters all 5. And I bet you're going to find there are 2 of them that resonate way more, or 3 of them. Tell them 10, right? Let me go through this full list of votes. But what you're going to consistently find is, man, that election integrity vote really ticks people off. You know what? That vote they took on social transitioning and hospital funding, that's really a kicker, even against people who knew this guy, right? So you're going to narrow it down, consistent messaging. Now's the time you get to kind of work some of these things out, but you're going to have to hone it in. And then you're going to have to stay really, really, really focused. The more focused you are as a candidate, an activist, an organization, people that organize, the harder it is for your opponent to actually push back against what you're coming at them with. The thing they benefit from most is if you're hitting them on something new every single week, okay? Because the truth is nothing's really landing long enough for people to really remember. And so that willingness to be disciplined within your messaging is really pretty key and important. And by the way, I think, Julie, I'm just clarifying for everybody to know kind of format. We're going to go through these kind of 15-minute sections, and then we're going to ask questions at the end. Is that correct? Great.
Yes.
Okay. And then also the right timing. And this is, I'm going to apply this in a broad spectrum when it comes to your time, your talent, your treasure, everything. Okay. So there are candidates and campaigns that I talk to who, have raised $30,000 and they've spent $30,000. Okay. That's way less than ideal at this moment in time. I remember conversations with the candidates here, Nate and Tim, and a lot of other victorious candidates in the past who, we're raising money and holding every single dollar they raise. And why? Because timing is really, really crucial. In most instances, I'm kind of talking mostly about races against maybe a bad Republican, but even in an open race, in any other instance, if you run a basic campaign where you leave it all on the field, work hard, raise a minimum amount of money, have that minimum amount of time, you are likely going to receive a pretty significant portion of the vote. Okay. So if you have some of the things I've talked about and you just go out and work hard, you're probably going to be able to get 35, 40% of the people to vote for you. I'm just going to be honest. You might lose, but you're probably not going to get 10, 15, 20, 25% of the vote. And then if your opponent is an establishment opponent, has a lot of funding from bad people and bad Texans and liberal establishment types, and they get crushed, they're probably going to get 40% of the vote. Maybe they get 45% of the vote. Okay. It's very rare that you end up with these massive lopsided elections, which means that ultimately most campaigns are fighting for the 25% of the least educated Republicans in the electorate. Okay. So now till the end of the year, you're building up infrastructure, you're organizing your volunteers, you're raising your money, you're getting your stuff set. Okay. All of these things are really important, but in that January, February timeframe, that 60 days prior to the actual vote taking place, that is when the least educated voters among us make their decisions. Timing is really important. A lot of candidates get out and they start burning a little too hot, a little too heavy. This happened with Barry Smitherman when he ran in an open seat against Attorney General Ken Paxton. He jumped in, he raised a couple $1 million. Everybody saw him as this big, mean machine. Everyone said he was going to be a super high contender. He outspent Ken Paxton from announcement till the end of the year before a May election. At the time, it was going to be March and then May. The election got pushed back. And by the end of the year, Barry had already spent over $1 million. And so he's all of a sudden sitting on just hundreds of thousands of dollars, not this massive cash advantage. Ken Paxton on the other side, had spent $250,000. And the $1 million he'd raised was almost all in the bank, right? And so all of a sudden you have a situation where Barry Smitherman has outraised Ken Paxton 2-1, but Ken Paxton has twice as much money as Barry Smitherman has in the bank. And on January 1, for what was going to be a March election, and now is not going to be a May election because the courts kicked it back, all of a sudden that became a really wise decision. Timing is really, really, really important. And it's the same thing for activists and everybody else, that a candidate who spends all the money and the volunteer who goes out and does everything they can to get everything done, and then all of a sudden January rolls around, and they don't realize that January and February is when we have to be turning it on as much as humanly possible. So timing's important. Timing's important for when you define your opponent. Time is important for when you spend your money, when you deploy the mass amount of volunteers that you have, all of those things. A lot of times candidates will, do a monthly block walk in the fall, but they'll do a weekly block walk in January and February, right? And it's just the amount of time that it takes to be applied to any given campaign. I'm going to give two other quick rules for y'all to be thinking about. So one is that I want you to focus on execution rather than perception. There's a lot of campaigns that get so obsessed with what people think about them. Okay. They want their friend at church to know they're running. They want, if they think that somebody perceives their opponent as doing better than them, they want to spend the money necessary to overcome that. They want to do the thing. They see their opponents doing something. They want to match them. He did that. I'll do that. He bought a billboard. I bought a billboard. He sent his first mailer. I'll send my first mailer. Right. And so you have to focus on execution, not perception. You have to not run. One thing it takes to win is to be more focused on what you need to do to win than what you think people think you need to do to win. Perception, another example being, let's say you get hit. Okay. You're a candidate, you get hit, or you're a activist. Most of the people, I remember Jonathan Sticklin used to have this. Every single mailer that landed that hit Jonathan Sticklin as some bad radical guy, every one of his supporters would call him and they go, you have to respond to this. You have to push back. We need to put a post out. And everybody would be enraged. Now, that was because in their minds, there were certain people out there that perceived a certain thing about a guy they really liked, right? And now Jonathan's like, how many people think this about me? I don't even know. So now everybody's worried about perception, not execution. And so we'd talk and I'd say, Jonathan, how many doors did you knock on today? And he'd say, I knocked 100. I say, okay, did anybody ask you about this attack on you? And he'd say, one guy. Okay, was he a supporter or opponent? He was a supporter. Okay, was he open to switching his vote? No, he thought it was the stupidest thing he'd ever heard. Okay, well, how about this? Until you meet someone block walking that tells you, I was going to vote for you, now I'm not going to vote for you because of this thing, we're not going to do anything about it, okay? Now, that is the difference between worrying about perception and worrying about execution. You have a plan, you know what it takes, how much time, how much money, what you need to do, so that's what you're going to focus on. Identify what you have to start. Okay. So everyone here is going to talk a little bit about that, Tim, with, volunteers and running campaigns and finances and everything. But there is sometimes a tendency to just get going. It does not take that long to sit down and quickly evaluate what you are bringing to the battlefield. Okay. It takes a day for you to sit down and call through a list of people and say, hey, my friend's going to run for the legislature. If he does, can I count on you to come to my house for an event, to block walk, or text a couple people or make a small donation, right? And within one day, you could say, okay, I've identified 30 people who told me they were willing to do this. If you're a candidate, you could say, hey, I just started calling through people, and everybody I called on this list told me that if I were to do something like this, they would gladly financially support me. I don't know exactly how much money that is, but I at least know that I'm going to have something coming to the table. I sat down and called some of the people that I know and said, hey, if I do this, are you willing to put some of your time in as well to help me get to all the voters? And every single one of them said yes. And I realized that list was 30 people long, or 50 or 100. But I will tell you, the amount of people that just go in, months in, you say, hey, how are you doing? I talked to a candidate, we will have candidates that we talk to that the day before they announce, they're like, oh my gosh, it's going to be great. The day they announce, they're like, everyone's so excited. And then a month later, I say, hey, how many donors do you have? They're like, 10. Okay, well, that's clearly the so excited thing didn't really seem to take off, right? How many people have shown up and signed up to volunteer for your campaign? I haven't really checked. Okay, so we basically are in a battle. Imagine just being in the middle of a field with a musket, right? And they're like, who else is here? You're like, I don't know. I just figured somebody needed to challenge the redcoats. I mean, that is the way there are people who do that, okay? So what do you actually have to bring? Money, time, all of that. Just spend it. That why y'all are here tonight is this kind of same question. So y'all are already doing some of that, but this is really important that everything that gets talked about tonight is actually worked on, so that by the end of the week, by mid next week, anything that y'all are going to do in any way, you're going to have a way better perception if you just spend a bit of time kind of gathering everything together, putting lists together and saying, this is what I think I can bring to the table. So that's it. And I put a timer on for myself so I wouldn't go over. I appreciate it.
Good job. Thank you, Luke. That was awesome. So next we're going to have Kathy Scott and Murphy McNutt. I hope that Murphy finally made it in. There's Kathy. Do we have Murphy?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, awesome. So Kathy is the former campaign manager and district director for Senator Connie Burton and former chief fundraising officer for the Huffines for Governor campaign. Murphy is former chief of staff for Representative Jonathan Stickland and former executive campaign manager for the Huffines for Governor campaign. Both ladies are currently with Pale Horse Strategy, Kathy as development director and Murphy as chief operating officer, and they will be discussing managing campaign finances. Take it away, ladies.
Thanks, Fran. I'm going to get us started, and we're just going to talk real quick about fundraising inside campaigns, and then Murphy's going to talk about the logistics of it, the budget of it, and some of the TEC reporting. So just to get us kicked off, I wanted to share a fun story, one of my favorite stories, which is I was making calls with someone who was trying to raise money for a campaign that was being run. And at this point, I have helped quite a few. I also, Fran didn't mention this, but I also was on Matt Beebe's very first campaign when he originally ran against Joe Strauss the very first time. And so anyways, I've got a long history of campaigning in Texas and have raised tens of millions of dollars for political campaigns and nonprofits. And so I have had the opportunity to sit and listen and be a part of and help guide a lot of people as they're talking to donors on the phone. And I was making calls with somebody and this person was getting ready to call a donor, and we didn't know exactly what the donor's capacity was. We had an idea. We knew that he had given about between $5,000 and $10,000 in the past, but that was about all that we knew. Well, we went ahead and called. We were like, okay, we don't know, what amount to ask for. So let's just kind of softball this a little bit. Well, we got to the part of the phone call where, you make that hard ask and you say, hey, how much are you going to be able to give? And the donor said, well, how much do you need? And in this one instance, the person making a call said, well, again, what do you think you could give? And we were planning on asking for probably $10,000 to $15,000, maybe 25 if it was going well. Let me tell you, this donor responded and said, how does 100,000 sound? And just like that, we had $100,000 in the bank within the next 3 days. So I just want to encourage you that you never know what a phone call can do. That was a 20-minute phone call with someone that person had not talked to in years, literally years. Had no capacity. We had no idea of capacity, and we had no idea of, where this person really sat. And so I just want to encourage you that phone calls work, asking for money works, talking to donors work, and you need money to run your campaign. I hate to say it. Nobody likes asking for money, but you have to have money to run your campaign. Luke talked about, here's an idea of what different campaigns cost. And I think that that's a really good benchmark. One of the things that you need to know, which Murphy's going to talk about a little bit more, is there is a governing board called the Texas Ethics Commission. I'm going to refer to it as the TEC, and it's a website online where it's got all sorts of information for you. If you're running for office on a state level, you have to be familiar with it. If you're running on a county level or lower, there, your county or your city has financial regulations that they ask you to follow. If you don't follow them, major fines can come. So pay attention to them. Murphy's going to tell you more about them. But you do need to know up front that your campaign is not a 501c3. It is not tax deductible. Your donors cannot get a tax write-off for it at the end of the year. So you need to know that, and they need to know that. You also need to know that all of your donors will need to be reported at some point. So if you have somebody that says, oh, I'd really love to support you, but I just can't have my name there. Well, sorry, their name is going to be on a report somewhere, somehow. So just those are two things that you need to keep in mind, no matter what, for every phone call. The next thing, Luke talked about this, but you must make a list. This must be the very first thing that you do when you start thinking about this. Should be before you launch your campaign. You need to make a list, literally write down on a piece of paper, put in an Excel spreadsheet. I would recommend doing it online or on your computer so that you can continue to add to it as your campaign grows. But make some sort of document that has a list of every person that you know that can give you a significant amount of money. Now, for some races, that might be $100. For some races, that might be $1,000. So maybe you start with who can give me $1,000 or more that I know that maybe I'm not comfortable right now asking them for money or thinking about asking them for money, but I'm going to go ahead and put their name down because at some point I might need to. And then, talk to your spouse, talk to your business partner, talk to your neighbor, ask them who they know. Make a second tier of, I don't know this person, but I know that this person knows this person. And so make a list of those people also. I would highly recommend that you have at least 50 people on that list. And then you should take that list, total it all up and see what it gets you. So if you're running for a state rep, then is that getting you close to $100,000? If not, let's go back to the drawing board. Are you being shy? Do you know that Uncle Bob really can give you $20,000, but you're only asking him for $5,000 because it feels awkward? Well, let's think through that. What's the real number that you really could ask someone to give? Then the next thing, this is the most important part of fundraising. Fundraising is not hard. It's actually really simple and really straightforward. But here's the bottom line, and people forget this. It is so obvious. You have to actually ask for money. You can't just go to a meeting. You can't just pick up a phone call and say, hey, will you support me? Oh yeah, I'd love to support you. Okay, well, what does support mean? Are you block walking? Are you telling your friend? Are you posting on Facebook? Are you writing a check? We don't know. So support, you have to actually say the words. Will you give me $1,000 to support my campaign? Will you give $5,000 to pay for a mail piece to go to my district? Will you give $10,000 for this TV ad to run that's going to reach X number of people? If you can ask for specific things or have a detailed plan of this is what this money will go to, this is how I'm going to spend it, working with your consultant, your campaign manager, and knowing the details of your campaign finance plan is incredibly helpful. Again, Murphy's going to talk more about that. You also need to think through, okay, what's the best way to ask this person? Is it a large amount? Do I need to go and sit down with them? Do I already know them? Do I need to ask somebody to be connected to them? Would it make sense to all these people work together, or all these people are neighbors? Let's see if we can just organize a nice little dinner at somebody's house or at a restaurant, and you make that ask there. You must get all of the information from your donors that you are getting money from. Then the next thing, which is also really obvious, is you do need to stay in contact with them. So you must say thank you. Go ahead and figure out a thank you process at the beginning and then just execute that. A lot of times it's spouses or children or siblings or the old lady next door who will write thank you notes for you or help you with thank you emails. Have some way to consistently thank your donors. And then you also want to stay in touch with them. So you want to tell them, hey, this really exciting thing just happened. You want to share the things that you're excited about in your campaign with your donors, the ones who have given and the ones that you hope will give, because they care. They're invested also. At this point, a lot of them are financially invested and they want to know what you're doing and how your campaign is going. It also really helps to continue to build a relationship because the goal is for you to get elected. Then when you get elected, you're probably going to run again, just like Nate, which is awesome. And we're excited to have him back, but he's going to have a better time raising money from donors that he's had a relationship with over the last year or 2 years, and not just people that he talked to when he asked for money 2 years ago and hasn't talked to since. No, we're running out of time. I want to pass it over to Murphy, but 2 quick things. I get asked about events a lot. Events can be really helpful, but they can also be really cumbersome and a huge time suck. And so I just would encourage you to be really mindful of what is the goal of my event, and then what would need to happen in order for this to be successful and executed well. So, sometimes it's you ask people to pay a sponsorship in order to come, or sometimes it's a ticketed event. Sometimes it's a rally. Sometimes it's just as important to get new people in the door than it is to make money. But figure out, is it a fundraising event or is it a campaign building event? And then the other question that I get asked about a lot is, okay, I've kind of gone through my list of people where, we've raised our first $100,000. Where do I go next if I need 150 or 200? Where else can I go find more donors? The TEC, the Texas Ethics Commission, again, like I said, you are going to have to report everything. Well, you can also see everything. So if you aren't familiar with it, you can go on there, you can search, you can look it up by candidate, or you can look up somebody's name, type in your name. And then you can also search your opponent and look at their Texas Ethics Commission report. You can look at, if you're running for state rep, I would look at your state senator's list of who's given them money, or vice versa. I would also look at who are some people that are like-minded that are maybe near you geographically, and go through their list and see if you know any of the names that are there. And then last thing is, most importantly, make sure that every single time that you show up to an event, you are talking to people, you are asking for money, and you are also getting contact information and saving that well. And that's it. Go ahead, Murphy. Oh, she's trying to unmute. We're getting there.
Okay, I'm here. Thank you. Thank you, Kathy, for that intro. That's great. And I'm really just going to start and kind of piggyback off what she said about you need money to run a campaign. And Luke touched on this too. But more than anything, from the very beginning, once you make that list of all of those folks, like Kathy said, about 50 people, it's really important you take a long, hard look about what are your core needs for your campaign. And that's really, really important, because depending on how your fundraising goes, maybe it's slow to start, and as people get to know you and you're out in the community more, or whatever that looks like, the fundraising is going to look different, right? It might really ramp up and things like that. So it's really important you build strategic budget plans based on those core needs at a very, very, very bare minimum. I like to rule on the side of build a plan if you raise the very bare minimum, right? But if you meet your goal of everything on your budget, right? It's your core needs plus maybe some wish list items of core things that you do need, but if you don't have the money, it's okay if you don't have it. And then building a plan, like I like to say, the 150% plan. So if you meet all of your fundraising goals, you're able to fulfill that budget and get your core needs plus that big wish list of items. Plus, if if you get money in that you weren't anticipating towards the very end or wherever you are throughout that campaign, you already have those dollars earmarked. It's really, really important to have a plan for all of the money that you have coming in. Like Luke said, depending on what happens throughout the campaign with mailers and hit pieces that go out, those are very, very easy to kind of take you off guard and try to veer from your plan, going from being reactionary versus execution. And so that's very, very important with your budget, that budget very much aligns with your plan to execute and what you are going to do to be successful in every way possible. So just to kind of dive into that a little bit more, it's really, really important, especially with races in Texas, a lot of money is spent, right? So we have to think about and be very strategic on, really trying to build a budget that matches, again, your goals. If you want to be successful, what does that look like? Because you're going to need the money to be able to do that. And so maybe it's a mixture of the money and the volunteers, but again, you need to have it all planned out so you have something to execute. Kind of jumping into the Texas Ethics Commission, Kathy gave a great kind of overview of what that is. And I want to dig into that just a little bit more because the TEC is very, very important. It is obviously a governmental agency. It's the administrative arm, and it's super important that you pay very, very close attention to what goes on there. So when you decide you're going to run for office, let's just say, It's really important. That's one of the first places you go, right? You've made your list of people who can donate. You've started to kind of build your plans, but the TEC has hard deadlines, right? It's a very kind of black and white thing, as I like to say. When you go to the TEC website, there are certain requirements for anybody candidate who's running for office, any person who currently holds an office, or even, for example, for a PAC. So those deadlines are super important. I like to pull that list. You can go on that website right now and see that they have the last 3 years posted up there of all those dates. Super important to calendar those dates, okay? That's specific to whatever kind of filer, quote unquote, you are going to be. So if you're a candidate, there are certain deadlines you have to meet, okay? So I always like to calendar those and kind of work backwards, because you always need to be mindful that those need to be calendared and filed appropriately. Otherwise, you can incur serious fines. And it's not one of those, they hit you with a slap on the hand, $50. 1 day late and it's $500, and it's $100, every day after that, up to a maximum of $10,000, which is huge. And that's not something that you want to pay for with campaign dollars at all. You also don't want that to be posted anywhere. The TEC has no problem putting out there who's a late filer, who doesn't file, and who is not in compliance. So it's really important that you have all of those documented. So just for kind of just reporting in general, as it relates to the TEC, there are just standard reports for any active filers, or again, you would be considered an active filer if you are running for office. So just keep that in mind. But they're just standard reports that are always being filed, both semi-annually, monthly, and annual for everyone that is considered an active filer. So again, really important you have those dates written down and calendared out. Each of those reports covers a certain period of time, okay? So it almost tells a story, and you can always go back, again, if it's someone who's held office for a while, you can go back and those donations show you, I mean, everything you need to know and more, right? It gives you the ability to go and follow the money. So really important that there's no kind of large gaps in those missing, because again, that's where you can incur fines, and you really get kind of more than a slap on the hand from the TEC. So once you figure out those deadlines based on the filer type you will be, again, that's something where you then would have to file it by the deadline both semi-annually, monthly, annually, etc. Whatever those dates are, they have to be turned in and filed electronically by the deadline on the day at midnight Central Standard Time. There's certain exceptions that are made where paper files can be submitted. However, you have to have a signed affidavit that's attached to it, and it has to be in someone's hand or certified mailed to the TEC by the deadline date. So we know how the post office can be sometimes, or with mail, either getting delayed and things like that. So it's always just a good rule of thumb to just be sure that you get it turned in electronically, and that's how it's typically preferred. So it's also very important to, whether you're just a candidate running for office against someone or someone who's unopposed, there's some slight differences there. Important to note those as well. But for contributions here, so the contributions, as Kathy said, it's really important to gather as much information as possible. Name, address, occupation, employer, date of the contribution, etc. Those are always just a good rule of thumb to always have. Now, there are certain circumstances where if someone during a certain filing period wants to, quote unquote, donate anonymously, but say it's cash, right? Maybe it's $20 here, $20 there. As long as it's under a certain threshold, so if it's under $90, it can be kind of given to the campaign as a lump sum, or your name is not attached. However, it's always just a good rule to always, for any contribution you receive, always good to have all of the information from each of the donors. Because at a certain threshold for that reporting period, and if it exceeds a certain amount, you're going to have the information anyway. So just start getting the information no matter what amount it is. Okay. It's just really good to have. So there's not really a way, like Kathy said, there's no 501c3, there's no really anonymity when you're donating to a political campaign. So just be mindful of that. I want to briefly touch on pledges. So pledges are promises to give something of value, whether that's goods, services, or money. So it's really, really important. The TEC does recognize pledges as a contribution. Now, the difference here is, let's say you decide that you want to donate to a candidate and you say, I'll pledge $500. You have, and as long as that candidate says, okay, great, then you have made that promise to donate that money. Now, you have to report that as a pledge for that reporting period on through the TEC. However, if it doesn't come in until, say, the next reporting period, you would then report it as received as a contribution during that time. So just be mindful of that, because it has to be recorded. And so if the pledge, let's say, yes.
Your time is up. Can you just wrap it up in about a minute?
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, I can. So just to kind of wrap that there, again, we kind of went over calendaring of the deadlines is super important. So be sure you do that. Be mindful of those administrative fines. It's not something you want to be spending your campaign dollars on at all. And then really important to retain your records for a minimum of 2 years. So any report that you file, even if you don't decide to run again or whatever that looks like, you need to keep all of your filed reports for at least 2 years. And then lastly, just always remember any donation you bring in, really, really important to get all the information from that donor, name, address, occupation, and employer, along with the date, to be able to report that accurately. So again, more details, the better, just because it will save your campaign and you won't have any headaches from the TEC.
Okay, thank you so much. Our next topic is building an effective volunteer base. And for that, we have Judge Tim O'Hare, who is very good at that. And I know that because I was part of that volunteer base for his campaign. Tim is currently the judge of the Tarrant County Commissioners Court. He is founder of Law Offices of Tim O'Hare and also served as councilman and mayor of the city of Farmers Branch. Tim will be talking with us about building an effective volunteer base during a campaign. Tim?
Thank you, Fran. Thank you, Julie. Thank you for all the work you do. It is good to be here with everyone tonight. So I've been listening to everyone else so far, and let me tell you, that is high quality advice, really good information. You're hearing from some really good people that know what they're doing and know what they're talking about. So how to build an effective volunteer base. So it starts, I mean, there's so many ways you can go with this, but it starts with this. You've got to run for an office where you have a good message, and you have to know what your message is. And if you're somebody that can raise $500, you should probably not run for Congress as your first foray into politics. But maybe you can run for school board and get elected there, where you can do it with a lot less money. So you got to start with picking the right place to run, and then you got to have a compelling message. So if you have a compelling message that you can sell, it's going to make it a whole lot easier to get volunteers than if you don't have a good message. And another piece of that is you have to exude confidence. So if you believe in what you're saying and you believe in what you're doing, then other people will buy into it and believe it. And so when you have those things down, I think the next thing that you've got to do is you've got to have a plan. And the way we did a plan in our last campaign, so I ran for county judge in the March of 22 primary, and then the general in for November. And so we planned everything out through a calendar, through a timeline. We knew when we wanted to have fundraisers, when we wanted to have kickoff events, when we wanted to have a dinner for precinct chairs. We started at the very end, worked backwards, and we had a calendar to go by. If you're not organized, then campaigns are, it's literally like running a mini corporation. So sometimes people jump in because they have the right ideas or the right values, and there's an open seat, there's somebody in the seat that shouldn't be there, and they just jump in and they're eager, guns ablazing, ready to go, but they have no plan. And then all of a sudden it comes flying at you. So we came up with a timeline working all the way from November 8th, I think was our date. Might have been November 7th, and worked all the way back to June of 21. And so we kind of knew what we were doing. Now you have to adapt, you have to adjust along the way. But knowing what we were going to do and when we were going to do it, we knew exactly when we needed to do it by. Then from there, how do you gain volunteers? Well, if you have a compelling message, you're running for an office where somebody like you is needed and wanted, whether that's because it's open or there needs to be a change, then you're going to go everywhere you can think of. So just like you heard earlier about raising money, I'll tell you something that Kathy said about raising money. When I first decided to run for this, I was asked, how much money do you think you can raise? And I thought I could raise probably about $250,000, and I had no idea. I was told that I'd be outraised 3 or 4 to 1 based on the person I ran against in the primary. And before it was all said and done, we had raised $1 million, a little over $1 million for the primary and over $1 million for the November. And it was the most money anybody ever raised for a county election in the history of Tarrant County by probably 4 or 5 times. And it's amazing how if you can sell it and people believe in you, that they'll give. And it's also when you can point to flaws or issues or problems with your opponent without being overly negative, and your message is just, they're bad, they're bad, they're bad, they're bad. You got to sell yourself, you got to sell what you believe in, what you're going to do, why they should get behind you, why it matters, and why this person is the wrong one. If you can do all those things and put all that together, now getting the volunteers becomes a whole heck of a lot easier. And where do you find the volunteers? Think of people that are your friends. Think of your cousins, your nephews, your uncles, people that you know, people you're friends with, people that you go to church with, people that you coach their kids' soccer or their baseball or basketball. Anybody that you know that likes you, believes in you. You'd be amazed how many people that are not political animals that want to help somebody on a political campaign, but they have no idea how to do it and they've never been asked. So you have to ask, and you have to ask again, and you have to ask again, and you have to reach out everywhere you can. And what you want to do is build the biggest email database you can, get emails from as many people as possible, from office holders, candidates, Julie and Fran, people that you know and trust that are in politics. Get these lists together and you can email people asking for volunteers. The other thing about volunteers is not every volunteer is a right fit for a specific job. So you have to know what you need volunteers for, and then you have to be able to figure out where they're a good fit. So if somebody hates to get up in front of a crowd, this is not who you send to the largest Republican club in the county to go speak for. By the same token, if somebody is not all that well kept and you don't want them knocking on doors for you and saying, hi, here, vote for this guy. Know where to put them. Don't ever try to, the old cliche, try to put a square peg in a round hole is very true when it comes to campaigns. But when you gather this list of volunteers, and you're going to keep adding to it. For us, we had a website that you could go to sign up for a yard sign, sign up to donate, sign up to host a meet and greet, and sign up to volunteer. Then you have to work your volunteers. Once they sign up, you can't just ignore it and give them something to do in a month. You have to work that relationship and let them know how much you appreciate them being willing to do it, and then give them things to do. You have to have a plan for what you want them to do. So think of all the things that we all kind of know that people do in politics: block walking, texting, emailing, social media. You want to have a social media response team. You want to have a texting team. You want to have a block walking team. You're going to have a fundraising team, go to events team. You're going to have poll workers. You're going to have people that go out and put up your signs. We were able to put together in our race, and I think we had something like 125, 130 volunteers. And then here's the next piece of the volunteer part. Most political consultants and politicos that know this stuff backwards and forwards will tell you, if you can put 70% of the money you raise towards direct voter contact, you're doing really well on the money that you're spending. So we tried to hit 80%. That was our goal. And we were tracking our opponent in the primary. And so certainly it's not scientific, but like things like we would do a TV ad and it would cost us $400 to $4,500 to produce it. We'd see her do a TV ad, and that was a $25,000 expense just to do the ad. So we were tracking hers and ours. It looked to us like she was spending about 54 cents of every dollar she collected to go towards direct voter contact, and we were up about 82, 84. And the way we got there was we had volunteers doing a ton of things. We had such an incredible army of people willing to work and willing to do stuff for us, and we kept adding to the numbers, but we also made it fun for them, and we took pretty good care of them. So we bought them pizza, and we got them food, and we just showed them how much we appreciated them. My wife helped us in the campaign. You've got to communicate with them regularly. And here's what will happen with volunteers. Somebody will be excited, they'll sign up. And then if you don't reach out to them, put them to work, they'll fall away. But if you put them to work and give them things to do and show that appreciation, they'll keep helping, they'll keep coming back, and they'll bring their friends. So I think the other thing that you got to do is you got to really target some qualified volunteers for specific things, like your campaign finance reports. So whether you are running for an office that reports directly to the Texas Ethics Commission, or you're running for an office that files something with the city secretary or with the school superintendent's office, those campaign finance reports are where you can get caught. So we had an accountant who volunteered to help do our campaign finance reports. And some people pay $5,000 a month for somebody to do that during their campaign. We got ours for free, and it allowed us to spend a lot more money towards direct voter contact. Here, I want to talk about churches and faith, houses of worship. There is an untapped group in churches that is hungry to get involved and hungry to go fight for biblical values, whether it's in school boards, city councils, county judge and commissioner, state rep, state senate, whatever it may be, all the way up to the presidency. And historically, I haven't seen a lot of political activity at churches over the years, but I am seeing it pick up now. And churches and pastors are I've seen from a lot of them, they are really picking it up, especially here in Tarrant County, and saying, we've got to get involved. We've got to tell our people to get involved. And so going to different churches, calling their pastors, speaking at church related events. Obviously, you're not going to go speak during a church worship service usually, although I did that 4 or 5 times during the campaign. But there are a lot of people there saying, how can we help? What do we do? And it's still untapped, but it's becoming more and more prevalent in these churches where they're saying, we got to go get involved in campaigns and elections. Several of the churches here in Tarrant County literally put people on a screen before election day, sometimes twice, once when early voting starts, once right before the Tuesday election for the general elections in November, and say, here's people we know, here's people we trust. Things, you just never used to see that before, but we're seeing it now. So we found a ton of people from churches all over Tarrant County that helped us with our campaign. And I think the last couple of things that I'll talk to you about when it comes to building this effective volunteer base are this. People are looking for leaders. They are looking for people who will stand up for the things that Most of the people on this call believe that. And I'm not saying you have to be obnoxious if you're a candidate. I'm saying be bold, speak out. So one of the things that I campaigned on without hesitation, didn't matter where I was, what room I was in, if I was in a nonpartisan group, if I was in a non-political group, I would come right out and say, as long as I'm county judge, we will never have mask mandates. I will never dream of shutting down churches or businesses. And I didn't care who the audience was. And I would say it boldly. And some people were offended by it or bothered by it. But most people responded to that, liked it, and they liked that I was being authentic. So be bold, but be yourself. Don't try to be something you're not. People want to follow and want to work for people that they think will stand up and fight and not just be go along to get along. Let me make sure I'm okay. Oh, that's got to be careful. I shouldn't say that. This could be bothersome. So be bold in your views, be bold in your values, let people know who you are and what you stand for. And people can see the authenticity, and they can see when you're passionate about something. They can see this guy can get something done. This lady knows how to do this. And then when you find some of those, so if you're not going to run for office, when you find somebody like what I'm describing, get your friends behind them and help them. He can absolutely get people across the finish line and win races and fill school board seats and city council seats and mayoral seats and these commissioner court seats. If we all bind together, people are hungry for change. They are hungry for people who are going to stand up and fight for our country. And I was always about standing up for our country, standing up for my faith in Jesus, and standing up for law enforcement, which was under assault, and has been for so many years. Those things worked, it resonated, and I did it unapologetically. So those are some of the things we did, and I'm certainly happy here when Nate is done to answer questions. If you haven't had a chance to hear from Nate, he is one of the most exciting, dynamic, young state reps we have in the entire state of Texas, if not the country.
Okay, thank you so much, Tim. As he mentioned, our next section is best practices for running a campaign, and we have Nate Schatzline for that. Nate is currently the Texas House Representative for District 93, which is my district. So I'm very proud to call him my state representative. He is a former pastor and founder of For Liberty and Justice, an organization dedicated to mobilizing churches. Nate was just recently elected in the 22 election, and he is currently in his first term as the representative for HD 93 in the Texas House. So Nate, tell us about best practices.
Yes, thank you so much, Fran. Thank you, Julie. And Tim, thank you so much for your kind words. We are incredibly blessed to have True Texas Project in Tarrant County and really all over the state of Texas to actually fight for our conservative values. And we're incredibly blessed to have Tim O'Hare as our county judge, who consistently does what he promised on the campaign trail and defending our conservative values. I'm really excited. I'm going to try and be very cognizant of the time as we go into this so that I can make sure I get through everything. But I've been tasked and I'm honored to be able to share best practices when working on this campaign. But I want to highlight something that Tim said before I even got on here. And that is the untapped market of the church that is truly what I believe the greatest source of getting the right people in office, but not just getting them there, keeping them there. We're in the business of not just using the church to win elections, but allowing the church to disciple those that are in the middle of the battle when it comes to being in public office. And so that's our heart and what we want to do. And so it matters just as much how you run this race. And for those of you who find victory in running for office, as it does how you operate once you're in there. And before we even get into best practices, and this may sound harsh, I hope it doesn't. I hope you see my smile when I say it, but I have been fed up. I've talked with Fran about this. I've talked with Julie about this. I've talked with Tim about this, Luke Macias as well, and all these other incredible activists. I am fed up with seeing politicians prostituting the church for votes and then not following up with the character that it takes to actually stand for faith, family, and freedom. And so if you're on this call and you're listening, my challenge to you is, as we go through best practices when it comes to running for office, recognize that your daily disciplines in walking with Christ carry just as much weight once you get into this position. Because hear me on this, the best politicians are the ones that have zero fear of man and only fear of God. And when you get in, recognizing I've got to do exactly what I've said that I'm going to do for my constituents, because our truth is all that we have. When we speak, we should be speaking from conviction, not because of a special interest group. And so I want to talk about, because if you're on this call, chances are, unless you are a troll that's on here, and I don't think we have many of those, chances are you are a true conservative that is going to be a grassroots candidate. And what I've noticed in the past is I was a grassroots candidate. I still am a grassroots candidate. But oftentimes, because of our conservative stances, because of our faith, because of everything that we believe, we allow that to be a crutch that keeps us from actually running efficient, strong, organized campaigns that are intentional in everything that we do. And so I want to talk through something that I believe is the most important aspect of a campaign, and that is your time management and the daily, weekly, and monthly responsibilities that you're going to carry as a candidate that's running for office with our Christian conservative values. We need to do it in excellence. I believe that all throughout Scripture, Scripture talks about working and in the midst of excellence. It says in Proverbs 21:5, the plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. And so before you go and file for a treasurer, before you go and jump in and begin to raise funds and begin to campaign, recognize we've got to count the cost and make sure that we have the structure in place to do this efficiently. And so I want to talk through the daily demand. And I'm going to give you 7 major daily tasks that I believe that every candidate should be doing. I believe 6 weekly tasks, and then we'll go into the monthly as well. And we're going to break it down. I'm a very structured person, and everything I've ever done, whether it be building nonprofits, in the church, and in the business world as well, I believe that strong time management leads to incredible results. And so we're going to break this down based upon a 168-hour week. That's how many hours are in your week, and we want to use every single one of them efficiently. So 7 major tasks that you should complete every day, with the exception of you observing your Sabbath or your day of worship. These 7 tasks include encountering the Lord, exercise, which isn't going to sound like, are you really wanting me to spend time exercising? I absolutely do, because if you're going to be a leader, people need to be able to look up to you. You need to have your health. You need to not look like Joe Biden when you're making a speech in your Republican club, and you need to be able to support your family and continue to do it at a high rate. You need to, so we've got encountering the Lord, exercise, a daily task, block walking, donor development. I put donor development / local events. Social media engagement, connecting with your family is number 6, and scheduling for the following day, week, and month. And so I'm going to break those down at hour by hour. Daily encounter being first. And the reason that I think that this is so vitally important is because we are in a spiritual battle when it comes to taking ground right now in the political world here in Texas, all across our country, as we see, the rumors of lockdowns and all this nonsense that's going around, and the lies that you hear from the fake news and from the media. And this is what we've got to understand, is that the only source of peace that we have is our Heavenly Father. The only grounding effort that we have is from our Heavenly Father. And so our daily encounters that I think are the most important things we do. Mark 1:35 says, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, went off to a solitary place when he prayed. This is what keeps us grounded and focused. Show me a man with no prayer life, and you're going to show me a man that's going to be swayed by every wind, trend, and different thing that comes into his life. And so we've got to get strong in our faith. And I believe that a campaign should lead you closer to God, closer to your spouse, closer to your family, not further away, because you are fighting for the principles that we have built in the state of Texas, and we should do it together. So daily encounter has to be a priority. And so even down to the science, if 1 hour is given to daily encountering the Lord, then that's a total of 7 hours per week. So you can mark that off of our 168-hour week. The next one is daily exercise. I'm going to come back to that one after block walking, but I think that it's still vitally important. Probably the number one thing that you are going to work on when you talk about a daily activity on a campaign is your block walking ability. Now, we've got donor development, incredibly important, raising funds, but when we're talking about a local election, I forget who it was, maybe it was Luke, who said 5,000 doors should be your goal. My goal was 10,000. And we ended up over the course of my campaign block walking 26,000 doors that were knocked. We're very proud of this, me and my campaign team, but the reality is that those doors, if I wasn't block walking 10,000 doors, I'm not going to expect someone to block walk 2,000 doors. I'm not going to expect someone to block walk 100 doors. There is nothing more effective than getting in front of your voter and showing your volunteers you are willing to put in the work. And so we designated block walking as a daily task, with the exception of your Sabbath or your day of worship, because in order to knock on the amount of doors necessary for victory, it's important to spread them out over the course of the campaign. So on average, you should spend 1 to 2 hours minimum per day block walking. Now, depending on the length of your conversations, time of day, and types of residential housing within your community, this should allow you to target 50 to 100 houses per day. On a personal level, that's what your target has to be. And so 50 to 100 houses per day over the course of a 5-month campaign will allow you to personally target 6 to 12,000 homes. That's it. 1 to 2 hours per day will target 6 to 12,000 homes, but you have to be consistent. When I was running, I knew I was going to be outspent 2 to 1 by at least one of my opponents in the campaign. And the only way I knew that I could conquer that deficit was to make sure that I was coming in strong and working the hardest. So you're looking at someone who was block walking on every single day of December, except for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day itself. On New Year's Eve and on New Year's Day, I am out hitting my quota for the day in block walking. And because our volunteers saw that, they were willing to give the same amount of effort, go all in, and actually win over voters. So a realistic goal would be to target the same number of homes you've reached personally with the volunteers. So however many homes that you want to hit, you should challenge your entire volunteer base to match those as well in total. And so, a realistic goal, this would effectively double your reach between 12 to 24,000 homes over a 6-month period. And so moving back to daily exercise, this is important. I'm going to keep it light. But at the end of the day, walking with God is not supposed to be glamorous, but it is supposed to be filled with life and the fruit of the Spirit. When physical health isn't prioritized, it doesn't just harm your calling and God's plan for your life, it also harms your witness. We want to be considered leaders. We want to be people that see us as someone who is disciplined. When you're talking to a donor, when you're talking to someone who is wealthy, when you're talking to someone who cares about character, it's very difficult when you can't catch your breath or aren't living a healthy lifestyle to be able to prove to those people that, hey, look, I have a disciplined lifestyle, that I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do. This is important. Include daily exercise. It's going to keep your energy levels up. This isn't for vanity. It's not for how you look. It really is to make sure that you're in a healthy position, because I'm going to tell you, it's going to take a toll as you're running this race. So we've got exercise, we've got daily encounters, we've got daily block walking, and now daily donor development and local events. One of the big things that I did from the top is create a list of 100 people that I was going to ask for a campaign donation from. And I sat down with family members. I said, hey, help me create this list of 100 people. And I called them relentlessly. I'll never forget getting and here's the deal. If you're too afraid to put yourself out there, then you shouldn't run for office. Because at the end of the day, you're not asking for money for yourself. You're asking for money to go change the current state of Texas and defend our values that are going to be handed over to the next generation. Anytime you get weird about it or start thinking, oh, yeah, I don't want to make the ask. I don't want to actually put myself out and make myself vulnerable. What about rejection? Forget all that. What you're doing is, this is for your children. How easy would it be if your child was starving to go ask someone to help you pay the bills so that you can get your child food? It's that easy. It's so simple, because there's so much at risk. Would you treat this campaign the same way, understanding that your children are literally at risk if we can't preserve the conservative values inside of our state? And so I have a pretty quick process I want to go through when it comes to actually developing your top 100 list, but you should be giving 1 to 2 hours a day developing relationships with your donors and or attending local events in order to build relationship with other grassroots conservatives as well. And so creating your list is pretty simple, writing those down. But then here's the important part. If you actually want to be perceived as someone who is a serious candidate, then you're going to have to show up top that you're willing to be organized with your approach. So we create a packet. That packet should include voter data from your district. Here's the R versus D breakdown. It should include campaign finance reports from former candidates or the last 2 election cycles, so that your donors, when you're about to ask for money, can see why you need the money to show the history of your district. It should include a map of the district so that donors know where you're invested in and where they should be invested in. It should include a fundraising strategy. This should not include the names of your donors, but it should include fundraising deadlines, potential fundraisers, numbers of potential donors, amount raised to date. You should also show them your block walking strategy. Hey, here's how we're going to hit this many doors. This is how many pieces of mail we're going to send. And then here's what we're going to spend on digital marketing as well. And once you've got all of that packet prepared, you can then prepare a 10-minute presentation of this in front of a large-scale donor, and then unapologetically just say, here's what I'm asking you for today. And if it's a no today, then I'm going to ask again next week, and I'm going to continue to be persistent. I remember I followed up with one donor, I believe it was 13 times, and then he ended up giving $15,000 to my campaign. Persistence is key when it comes to this. So donor development should be done on a daily basis, as well as getting in touch with your local clubs, local community, showing up to board meetings, showing up to True Texas Project, showing up to your local Republican clubs. Show up. Show that these people have value, and show them that they are actually out there on the cause and should be rewarded with your presence, with your time. Your time is no longer your own if you're running to be a public official, and we need to be willing to give our time freely. Next is daily connecting with your family. Before I go to social media engagement, I'm going to be quick with this. We should be giving, I know this sounds really small, but if you're a father like I am of 3, if you're a husband, I make up in my schedule to make sure that I have at least 30 minutes of conversation with my kids every day, no matter what event, so that I can engage with their world and what they're doing. I do the same thing with my wife. Why? Because a happy marriage and a successful marriage and a healthy marriage is going to lead to healthy areas of all aspects of your life, and making sure you're on the same page. The other thing it does is it pulls them into the battle, show them what's going on. I tried to shield my kids from the way I was getting hit from my opponent in my campaign until one day I couldn't anymore. They picked up a campaign mailer that had 8 lies about me on there. And I'll never forget my son getting so fired up. Why would they say these things about you? And I realized, wait a second, I've been shielding him from the battle that he can now engage with me in. Let's get these kids involved. They can pray, they can block walk, they can get involved and recognize. Look, my son could tell you more about Republican politics in Texas at 8 years old than most teenagers in high school could to this day, because we've pulled him into the battle and we've made him a part of it. So daily, that's 30 minutes with your family, with your wife, 30 minutes with your kids every day. Local events, that's going to end up being down to about 1 to 2 hours per day. So that's 6 to 12 hours of your week. Going back to working out, that's 1 hour a day. That's 6 hours of your week. Daily block walking is 1 to 2 hours a day. That's 6 to 12 hours of your week. Now let's talk about social media engagement. Really quick, here's the purpose of social media. Don't spend all day on it. Social media should be used to accomplish 3 different goals. First, it should be used for exposure and to highlight your platform and your beliefs. Second, it should be your plan to highlight your plans for change. That's first. Second, it should be to give updates on your campaign trail in regards to endorsements, highlighting events, showing your voters you're willing to put in the work. Post a selfie of you block walking. Take a video of you block walking. Show that you're working. It's important that your volunteers see it and everyone else. And then lastly, social media is a great avenue for engaging with your voters through conversations online. But don't get caught up. 30 minutes max. And then if you can, designate a highly trusted volunteer to run it for you. Last is daily connecting with your family. Actually, daily scheduling is last. Daily connecting with your family. We talked through daily scheduling. You should take 30 minutes per evening and schedule out your next day to make sure that every single one of these things is being met in your daily calendar. This is important. If we don't take inventory of what we have, we're being bad stewards of what we have. And so recognizing, oh man, okay, block walking went for 3 hours today. I didn't get to make my donor calls. You know what? I'm going to need to put 30 more minutes in to make sure that I'm calling my donors, connecting with them. And then it's not just, and I don't have enough time to go through our donor development plan and how many touch points we have, but it's not just asking for money. It's also calling your donor every few weeks that has given you money and updating him on, hey, I'm just so proud to tell you, this is what we did today. That's only because of your contribution. You had a part in this battle with us. Here's what my opponent's going on. This is kind of where we're at. This is the next big battle we've got. I'd love for you to be at this event with me. It's going to be a blast. When you engage them in the fight, they'll continue to be in relationship. I remember all throughout session, I would call certain donors that were highly invested in my campaign when we get a huge victory. And I would say, hey, would you partner with me in prayer? You helped me get here. Now help me be able to battle and have the courage to go out there and fight for the values that you put me here to do. And secondarily, if something bad had happened, I call them, you never guess what happened today. This is bad. We need your prayers. We need you to get on the phone, call your state senator, get them on our side. This is vital that those donors are not just a call when you need money. They're actually a call because they're engaged in the fight with you, that they're actually running. I'm going to quickly go through the weekly demand. I think I've got 18 minutes, so I've got 2 minutes left, Fran. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Weekly demand, 6 major weekly tasks that you should complete every week with the remaining 31 hours after you've done the things that I just said. Number 1 is you should take 1 day a week. And I know this sounds crazy. Some politicians agree with me on this, some don't. But I believe that the 10 commandments are still true for today. We need to honor our Sabbath. You've got to have a day of rest. That's how you get up and get recharged and ready to go the very next day. And so one of the weekly disciplines that I followed every week during the campaign was my weekly Sabbath. I'm going to honor the Lord that day, to honor him, honor my family, and spend time with them. Weekly church attendance and serving. Not only is the church the most untapped place for those that want to be engaged in policy and in politics that have never been, it's also a place that we're called to give our time to. And so weekly attendance and serving, we need to be fed spiritually in the battle that we're in. Next is a spiritual oversight and health check. If you don't have a pastor that has the ability to ask you the tough questions, ask you how you're doing, ask you how your health is, then I would challenge you to find a pastor that's willing to meet with you each week for 30 minutes and ask you the tough questions. How's your thought life? How's your family? How's the campaign going? Is it taking a toll on you spiritually? What do you need prayer for? Gather a prayer group that's willing to cover you every single week and meet with them for 30 minutes. Last is family time. Make sure that you're having dinner with your family 1 to 2 nights a week at minimum. This is vital. It goes beyond the 30 minutes that you spend every day, and make sure that you have 2-hour dinners twice a week. I did this all throughout the campaign to make sure my kids and family felt me and felt that I was engaged. And then lastly, you have 30 minutes left in that 168-hour work week. You need to have a staff meeting with your team every single Monday morning to go over the plan, the strategy that you're about to go through, and to execute it properly. And so this is kind of the schedule that I've kept, guys. This is what I believe works. I believe that it's incredibly vital that you engage in this way and that we stay structured in everything that we do. And so I hope that's helpful. And thank you, Fran. Again, thank you, Julie, for allowing me to be on here.
Okay, thank you, Nate. I got tired just listening to all that, but he's a lot younger than I am. So we are going to go into our question period now, and you've all typed in questions here. Julie and I are going to read them and reference them to one of our presenters. We have about 15 minutes to do this. So Julie, why don't you get started?
Okay, so yes, I've also had several people text questions to me, and Fran, I actually have already ranked these how I want to ask them, so I'm good to go on this. The first one, if we could get Luke Macias back on. The number one question we have seen is, I don't want to run for state rep. I want to run for precinct chair or ISD or something a lot smaller. Luke, can you give them some pointers? And when we do these Q&As, we have a lot of questions in a very short amount of time. So, yeah.
I have just a very, very bullet points. I wanted to tell y'all, Nate Schatzline did knock 10,000 doors, but he also won by 60%. And, you know, you can win with 51%. So he walked too many doors and you can put too much work into it. When you got to pass a class, you know, unless you're trying to be valedictorian, just get the class passed. So anyways, just wanted to tell you all that. Also, the person he called like 15 times for 15K, that was his mom. So it was sad that he had to ask so many times, but I guess there was just, you know, a lot of childhood stuff he had to work through. Okay. Precinct chair races, and school board races. Tim and Nate are also really involved with these school board races. Just know $10,000, $8,000, $5,000, just depends on the candidate and how organized you are with other people as far as running that race. So less time. But I will tell you, when it comes to time, you still have a lot to do as a school board candidate, depending on the school board race. So some school boards will be 300 people in rural Texas, and some school boards will be 3,000 people. So you got to actually figure that out. Still going to take a lot of time, but likely less money when it comes in to running that actual race. Precinct chair, super fun. Love precinct chair races. I'm a precinct chair. Other people are precinct chairs. So, couple key things are, one, I would recommend you get your list of Republican voters. If you don't know, you can reach out to conservatives in your area and get the list of every Republican voter in your precinct and go knock on their door and talk to them. My recommendation too is you make a list. At minimum, I would make a list of the candidates you want to help. So if you have conservative candidates in your area, you take a list and say, I want you to go vote with this list. And of course, you're on the name. If you don't have a lot of conservative candidates in your area, I'm in a Democrat area. Okay. I give them a list of every single ballot initiative in the Republican primary. So here's all the ballot initiatives and here's what I would vote. It's something the voters won't know how to vote on. And they're just going to vote yes on all of them, but they think they don't know. So then you just give that the list and you put yourself at the top and you give them something to go in. Slates are really important with precinct chair races. You don't spend a lot of money. You hardly ever do. You don't do mailers. You don't do any of that. The last quick thing I was going to answer, Julie, because I saw a question about somebody who said they don't have time to block walk or they have a disability, they can't get out. They can call. You can stuff letters. This is really powerful. If you write a letter to every Republican in your precinct and hand address it, all that crap mail that shows up gets a really low response rate. A handwritten letter gets an 80% open rate from your neighbors. So if you write them a letter telling them why you're voting for Tim O'Hare or Nate Schatzline, you drop that to every person in your precinct with your cell phone number, I guarantee you'll have even more conversations than if you block walked, and it might even make a bigger impact. So that's one thing to consider. And then texting as well. You can get a Rumble Up account or a Purely account as a conservative organization and start sending text messages out and then actually reply to voters yourself on the text message and a candidate as well. So these are some other tools that are available.
All right. Thank you, Luke. Okay, let's get Tim O'Hare on here. Tim, we want to know, how do you balance time between big donors who expect special treatment and small donors that are actually really hard workers?
I love that question. Of the big donors that I had, I can tell you one of them likes to talk politics and has become a good friend, but he's never asked me to do a single thing while in office. Other than when we first met, he said, are you somebody that would ever put in mass mandates or do shutdowns? Other than that, he's never asked me for a thing. Of my other three biggest donors, two of them have never asked me to do a single thing. They asked me what I need. One of them has asked me to review some documents related to ethics policies. I just haven't found what they said to be the case here in Tarrant County. I will tell you, when it comes to raising money, you want a combination of both. You want to ask for money from big donors, but you want a lot of small donors as well. The small donors will probably be way more likely to volunteer for you than a big donor. And but my biggest donor did volunteer work, and so did his son. But the other thing that you'll get from that is just when people are invested in your campaign, they can be invested as a volunteer, they can be invested as a donor. They want you to win more. They'll do more for you. They'll tell more people. So the more people you have invested, even if it's a tiny amount of money, the better off you are.
Very good. Okay, Nate, this one is for you. Is it okay to do a hit piece as a candidate, or do you hand that off to volunteers to do? And is highlighting a voting record a hit piece?
Yeah, that's great. My opponent highlighted my voting record. So yeah, I would say that it is a hit piece. And of course, they did so falsely. And I had to, I ended up did respond to that one. Not everything's worth responding to. I thought that was a great point made by Luke. Also, the donor was not my mom, but thank you, Luke. It's so funny, but no, ultimately, listen, there is nothing dirty about telling the truth. And I think that's what we always go to. And also, there's nothing dirty about telling the truth about policy. And I think that's always been my go-to, is understanding that if we're going to do a hit piece, because the reality is the voters deserve to know the truth, then yes, absolutely, then we should be willing to speak the truth. In other words, it can't be all your messaging. I think Luke would probably be a really good person to add into this as well, because he's given me some wisdom on this. But and it also needs to be you. There was dirt that was given to me on my opponent that I didn't use, because at the end of the day, as a man of faith, I did not feel like it was policy related, and I didn't feel like this was something that should play into a race. And then there were other things that were handed to me or revealed that I was like, absolutely, we're going to use that. We're going to shoot a video about it. We've done anything, mail pieces, a video. Sometimes it's wiser to allow other PACs that support you to send mail like that. And other times, depending on your consultant and how you guys go back and forth, it's good to just get the truth out there. I would say your messaging should not be predominantly attacking your opponent, though. Your message really should be about how you're the right candidate that's going to stand for the right values.
That's an excellent point. Okay, can we get Murphy and Kathy back on? Are they still available? I actually have a bunch of questions for them, but they're all real quick answers. So.
Yep.
I see Murphy, great. Okay, and then if Kathy gets on, great. Either one of you can take these questions. One of the questions, it kind of combines a couple different questions. When is it valuable to hire a fundraiser, a campaign manager, or a consultant?
Ooh, yeah. Why don't you start, Kathy?
For a state rep race, I think that if you are spending $100,000 or needing to raise $100,000, I think that at that point, that's well worth it. You should know that most fundraising consultants or most consultants will take between 10 and 15% of the money that you bring in. So you do just need to have that for whatever office or whatever thing you're running for. If you're running for precinct chair, you don't need a fundraiser, you don't need a consultant, you don't need a campaign manager. If you are running for school board or higher, I would say that it would probably be a good idea to have someone giving you direction and making sure that you're staying on the right path. But I think that school board, city council, that could be just one person, and it's a low amount of hours just touching base with you and giving you some guidance. I would not say that you need a fundraising consultant for that. County commissioner, county judge, maybe on the fence. Our county judge, obviously, but county judge, yes. County commissioner, most likely, yes. All of the above. And then anything above that, I would say yes for all of the above.
Okay. Murphy, this one's probably more for you. How do you report an anonymous donor?
So like I mentioned, there's a certain threshold for that to be anonymous. So in a specific reporting period, as long as it's under $90, again, you can't exceed a threshold. That's the only time that it would be kind of lumped in to the campaign finance report once it's filed as a lump sum amount where it doesn't have to be broken out. But generally speaking, I mean, really donating to a campaign, there's really no, and then I cannot say that word. You really can't be anonymous. So that's just something to think about. And again, it doesn't, for the smallest, I've been a donor on many reports for as little as $5, and that's okay. I think having those small dollar donors is really, really good, but to be anonymous is just really difficult. So I don't know, Kathy, if you want to add to that, but.
I think we got it.
Okay.
Unless you have like great wisdom, we won't take that time. What IRS forms are required? And I think this is as opposed to the TEC or did we lose them?
Well, you can still hear us. I would I would check with whatever office that you're filing for. Whatever, if you're filing for precinct chair, I think that that's just with your county party. And so they will know if you need to file something or not. You can also consult your CPA, your personal CPA, or a lawyer. But it's not a one and done for across the board kind of answer. If I could just add one quick thing, everybody has kind of talked about big donors and small donors. I do want to say that small donors are incredibly important. One thing that does get talked about, and a finance report gets put together and sent and made public, reporters will talk about how many people were on your finance report. And even if somebody gave $1, $2, $5, that really matters also. So I just want to encourage people, $5 Friday, or come up with something fun that goes with your name. But really work on making sure that you're also still getting those small dollar donations in, because they really do matter. Your TEC report could be 5 pages or it could be 500 pages. The more pages, the more impactful it looks and the more intimidating it looks.
Great. And then last question for the finance gals. Is there a better day to work on fundraising calls? Like, is it the weekend? Is it the evenings? Like, what day of the week? What do you think is successful?
There is kind of a mixed bag of opinions here. I would say one thing, which is a lot of people who are running for office also are, skilled at business. If you're skilled at business, one thing, and it's that whatever your customer wants is what they get. And I don't mean that if a donor asks you to do something, then you do it. That's not how we run politics. But if a donor, you find out that they are much better at texting, text them, don't email them. If they really prefer to only email and they don't want to talk on the phone, email them, don't talk to them on the phone. Figure out what your donors care about. I have found that lunch, it's just so hard to nail people down. Some people are super busy during the day and some people are not. Honestly, like that 8 to 9 o'clock in the morning hour, people are just starting to get into their day. That's a good time to call. Also, from about 4:45 until 7:30 or 8 is a good time to make phone calls. I avoid Sundays because a lot of people really do get annoyed to have to do work, talk politics on Sundays. I'm okay with Saturdays, but I would stop at about 3 o'clock so that people have Saturday evenings to themselves. They're not going to answer their phone on Saturday night, most likely, and they're going to want to be with their family or their friends doing something fun.
Great advice. Okay, I know we're a little bit past 8 o'clock, but there are just a few questions left that I really want to hit on. So anybody who needs to jump off can jump off, but if you're good to stay on, we'll keep going just a little bit longer. This one is for Nate. What are some unexpected expenses that you've encountered? Gas, walking shoes. I know Tim talked about buying pizzas. Like, what are some things that were unexpected for you? They're going to have to unmute you.
There we go. There we go. Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the unexpected expenses, I'm gonna take this question and kind of answer it, and I hope this is okay. Answer it in my own way. I'm going to tell you what I wasted money on that I'll never waste money on again. And so let me tell you, even the unexpected cost of signs and how many, listen, I got so many calls from precinct chairs, activists that are all just champions for conservative values. They would call me, like, Nate, Beach Street doesn't have 35 of your signs on it, but your opponent has 36. And it was a constant, and because I was so unaware of what this money should be going to, I was like, all right, I guess we got to get more signs. I guess we got to make sure that we have this. And what I found is that what wins elections is your strategy you put in place and following it closely. I was not aware of how expensive a mail campaign can be. Direct mail is insanely expensive. It's not near as expensive as what it would have been for County Judge Tim O'Hare's. I don't know what their single piece of mail, but for a House district, each piece of mail for us was $7,500 just to hit our 3R voters. And that's people who have voted in 3 Republican primaries. And so, knowing those numbers up top is incredibly helpful, because then it helps you strategize. And I would just challenge you with this: is do not waste money on 1,000 t-shirts for volunteers. Look, when they walk onto a door, they can hand a card that has your name on it, that t-shirt is doing very little. If they're good at the doors, they're good at the doors. If they're bad at the doors, then it's probably good they didn't see your name on the t-shirt. And so ultimately, making sure that we're not wasting money on campaign paraphernalia when we should be spending money on our message and getting them to direct voter contacts. And so I was shocked at how expensive digital marketing was. I was shocked at how expensive mail was. And then I was shocked at, once you're in office, how expensive it is to serve your district while in office. And so recognizing that if you're specifically running for state rep, you've got to maintain residency in Austin and in your home, and you've got to be able to save enough from your workplace to be able to do that and spend 5 months in Austin. So ultimately, I would just say that creating a game plan upfront, pricing things out properly upfront is vitally important so that you can have a realistic game plan. And then I love, I think, I don't know who said it, but I love going to a donor and making a specific ask and saying, hey, we're going to be able to send another text message to the entire district if I can get you to make a donation of $2,500. I'm going to be able to send another mailer out with a donation of $7,500. You have no idea how many donors I was able to go to. And they're like, oh, I see the purpose. I see the goal. I see what it's going to do for you. Absolutely. I'll get that money to you by the end of the day. And so I would just say, don't waste your money on campaign paraphernalia if you don't have money to get direct voter contact reached.
Can we leave, Walker, can we leave Nate up and bring Tim up at the same time? Because I think Tim and Nate are kind of saying the same, that you have to have Tim, what number did you say? Like 80% to voter contact? Aren't you the one that said that?
I think if it's 70%, you're doing well, and we were at about 84.
Okay, so one of the questions is, I have a limited budget. What is best? Mailers, text messages, social media, yard signs? Clearly it's not t-shirts that have Tim O'Hare on it, right? So what is it?
Well, let's start with this. It's definitely not yard signs. So the funny thing amongst candidates and office holders is how many people want you to have yard signs. And like Nate said, I literally fielded more calls during my primary campaign or messages from somebody saying, you didn't get a sign over here, it's not at this corner. We literally would send somebody out, and it would be an intersection, four corners, and they would have a sign on one side and we would have a sign on the other, and they would be upset that we didn't have a sign on that corner. So you got a lot of stuff like that. So it's definitely not yard signs. It depends on the race we're talking about. If it's a limited budget and it's precinct chair, it's touches. So you can win a precinct chair race literally just by going to the polls during early voting, passing out something that you print off yourself and shaking hands, smiling and giving them that. If it's school board, I think you could still, depending on the size school district, I think it's still the touches. But if I had to pick one piece of advertising that I would think this is probably the most effective you can do, I still think it's mail.
Anything you want to add to that, Nate? Or
No, I could not agree more. I would tell you this. When I went to the doors, nobody ever said, oh, I saw your sign. You know what people said is, oh, I've seen you in my mailbox. And, ultimately, here's the deal. Advertising will tell you that you need 8 touch points to be memorable and to be able to see people recognizing that while it's expensive, at the end of the day, if you have a good mail provider, if you are partnered with, and this is another kind of a side note, but who you hire as a consultant matters. And so even on this aspect of fundraising as well as spending your money, there are consultants that will take advantage of you and don't even provide a good service. And so finding the right, I have the same consultant as Tim does. We search diligently to be able to find people that were going to serve us well. And be able to serve our constituents well. And so that comes to it. If it's a higher level race, state rep and above, and you're going after a consultant, make sure that you're hiring someone who has your best interest in mind and is going to be honest in what they charge you for all of their services.
Very good. Okay, let's get Luke back up here. Luke, how do you recruit a candidate in a conservative district if your incumbent is not fighting for you? So basically, how do we recruit good candidates?
One of the things I encourage, and this has happened a couple different times when you're to the recruitment we basically see that there's this organic rise of a lot of challengers, and there's certain districts that you need to try to go find somebody. The most effective thing I've seen is that you literally first make a list of everybody you know that might want somebody different, start calling around, get an actual group together. So it's not just you alone, and then bring a potential challenger to you. So you literally say, hey, I want you to run. And I'm having this conversation with somebody right now. And hey, I think you should consider running. There's a lot of people that I've talked to that think that you'd make a great candidate. Oh, really? Who? Well, how about this? We'll all sit down in this city, which is in the district, and I'm going to get 9 people together. We're all going to sit down and talk to you about why each and every one of these people would help you. One is the head of a Tea Party. One is a donor. One is a former elected official. One is a current small city mayor. And all of these people are going to say, we will help you if you do this, right? So it's not just somebody doing it, but it's them seeing that they're not alone in doing it. So that's, I think, the most effective thing.
I think that's great. I would also add to that myself is that I find most people like to feel like they're on the inside. So if you have a team of people that can recruit somebody, then they feel like they're on the inside and they're going to be more dedicated to that campaign.
100%.
Okay. This one is for Kathy. And this will be our last question. And then we're wanting to do a group picture. I have no idea how that works, but Walker does. So don't hang up yet because we want you in our group picture. I think we've already lost like 15 people, but that's okay. Kathy, have you ever seen an hourly wage earner run, win, and still be able to continue their career? In other words, do you have to be a lawyer in order to win office?
I might softball this over to Luke, but I think that Michelle commented on that and said that she ran down in Georgetown, Austin area and had her job the whole time she was running. So Luke, maybe if you want to, because I'm more on the raising money side, not necessarily the how do you.
Quick answer. I know we're on time, so I'll make this quick. It depends on what they're running for, right? For school board, absolutely. For a small city council, 100%. For county commissioner of a mid-sized county to small-sized county, definitely. For state rep, it's much harder. And so I would say that it really depends on how far you get up the ladder as to how easy it would be. It also depends on if you have a spouse that works. If you don't, there's a lot of people that run and don't have a job, but their spouse is making a lot of money or some money, or they're working part-time, but their spouse is working full-time or part-time. And so it's a combination. But if they're the sole breadwinner and they're working, it's just going to be very, very difficult.
Okay, Walker, you want to, well, first of all, let me thank those of you that jumped on, because that means you care about Texas, and our whole goal is to save Texas. So thank you for giving us almost 2 hours of your evening. And then to our 5 or 6 panelists, you guys, I am floored, and I live this and breathe this every single day, and I am floored with the wisdom that you've shared with us tonight. So thank you so much, seriously.